Zeke, our fans have turned it into a drinking game. Take a drink now when Hondo takes his glasses off.
Oh man, got to make sure they drink some water or some Gatorade.
There's 3 drinks for him right there. How about 4? All right. Zeke, good to have you here with us today. Hi, everybody. I'm Hondo Carpenter, the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. This guy next to me is the great Zeke Trezevant. I am your Sports Illustrated Las Vegas beat writer. He is my assistant beat writer. Man, he's so good. Does such a great job helping me cover the silver and black. He's a prolific writer. Does a lot of great coverage of the NFL and college, and we love and appreciate the great Zeke Trezevant. Zeke, we got so much to talk about today. I can't think of a better way to spend my Saturday than with Raider Nation and Zeke Trezevant. And because you are a Raider fan, you bring a little bit different perspective. And I like that. I like the perspective. I want to go back. We're going to review free agency so far. And then we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk the 3 quarterbacks on the roster. And then we're going to talk about the draft and a potential quarterback. All right, we're going to be busy today. We're all silver and black. So let's start with additions. You can't have any bigger addition physically or I think football IQ impact mentally than they go to the Dolphins. And for the 3rd time, 3 years in a row, they've gone to the Dolphins and signed a captain. Mac Hollins, who was a special teams captain, John Jenkins, who was a captain, and now they go and get Christian Wilkins. Man, there's something going on with that Miami to Vegas connection. Christian Wilkins, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest moves in free agency, and I think it's a move that can help the Raiders out on the defensive side and on the offensive side as they continue, in my opinion, to kind of transition to a defensively led team. So it's a huge signing. I think it's going to reverberate around the entire team, and I think it's going to do wonders for the team as a whole.
I totally agree with you. Then they go out and they sign Gardner Minshew. Now, we're going to talk about him more in a minute. But this is a guy that's beat him. It's a guy that's physical. They don't give him a contract that says, hey, you're QB1. But you can't win in this league without a good backup. He's got a chance to beat Aiden. I don't think he will, but he's got a shot. And he's got a deal that's so manageable that if they go get a rookie and the rookie shows anything, they can kind of let Gardner out the door. I thought this was a great signing. You pay him more than a backup, but you certainly don't pay him anything that's not manageable. Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, so listen, I completely agree with you from the standpoint of, first of all, like you said, that Gardner beat him last year. And I think that was one of the things that stuck in their mind of how much of a competitor Gardner is. And then the number in terms of how much they paid him, it's not QB1 money. It's a very strong QB2 money. And I think that speaks to what the Raiders believe of him in terms of potential. And then, like you said, you go draft a young quarterback. He's going to be on a rookie contract for 4, maybe 5 years. It makes a lot of sense to maybe look into all 3 of your options for sure.
All right, now they go to the Browns. They got Minshew from the Colts, and they go to the Browns and get Harrison Bryant. Now, let's be honest about this pick. This is a guy that a lot of people were like, who? But when you look at his ability to block, his ability to catch, his numbers are not impressive. I'm not trying to pretend like they were. We're not trying to make more of it. But they love his upside. They love what he does. They love how he does it. They just feel like he needs to get more reps. He needs to get more opportunity. But they go again and get a very good deal. And they get this guy. I think this could be an under the radar signing in Harrison Bryant.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think with him, he's going to be one of those guys where it's the sum of all the parts. If you look up anything about him, like you said, you're not going to find a whole lot. The stats don't really jump off the screen at you. But at the same time, if you put him with the Raiders, maybe he has a chance of panning out a little bit more than where he was before. So I think that's what the Raiders are looking at. Really, with all of their moves, they're not necessarily looking at Christian Wilkins or so-and-so or so-and-so individually. They're looking at that player with everything that they have on the roster already. And I think this is another good signing for them under the radar, like you said.
All right, and then last, I want to talk about Alexander Mattison, the running back. I thought this was a very good signing, but I want to explain why. No touchdowns last year running the football, but once Kirk Cousins went down, every team loaded the box on the Vikings. And they weren't going to run. And he still runs for 700 yards. He's a thumper. He's a guy that can block. So you can leave him in on third down. He is a ramrod. I like this pick. You know, the money. In a minute, we're going to read a email that I got. Well, I'll just read it real quick because it fits here. This comes to us from Cassandra L., and she lives in Eunice, Florida. Cassandra L. Cassandra says, Hondo, you use the term cheap and frugal. Can you explain what the difference is? And this is the difference. If a player is worth 10 and you offer him 8, you're being cheap. Or if you say, let's go sign 2 3s and 1 2 to equal one player, that's just being cheap. That's horrible. But being frugal is, hey, you're worth a 10. We're going to pay you a 10, but we're not paying 10-5. Cheap and frugal are two completely different things. And with Madison and Bryant and Gardner, they did it, Zeke. And I know that's part of the drinking game, but I wanted to answer Cassandra's email. It is being frugal, which means, hey, if this is what it's worth, I'm willing to pay it. I'm just not willing to overpay, and not being cheap, trying to nickel and dime people where you piss them off and then they don't want to be part of your team. Your thoughts on how they approached Alexander, and how they approached those players?
So yes, in terms of, again, first and foremost, it goes back to the sum of all parts. Again, you throw that veteran running back in the backfield with Zamir White, with Abdullah back there, it's going to pan out well. To your point, though, about the difference between cheap and frugal, I would say this: cheap is a way of life. Is when you're consistently trying to lowball, you're consistently trying to nickel and dime. That's cheap. Frugal is just trying to find the best deal, which I think it doesn't matter how much money you do or don't have as a person or a team. You want the best deal. You want to get the best value for your buck, and I think that's what Tom Telesco is doing, or has done, for most of his moves this offseason. So, again, when it was time to pay Wilkins, he paid it, right? But at the same time, now when you go to running back and other positions, we're going to make sure we're getting the best deal possible across the board. So he's shown both.
I had a lady email me and say, Hondo, here's a great explanation of cheap but frugal. When my husband was dating me, it was steakhouses. When we're married, it's McDonald's dollar menu. Cheap, cheap, cheap.
There's a major difference.
All right. Now let's talk about some signings where Tom Telesco earned a lot of favor with his locker room. I know because players have told me. He goes and signs Christian Wilkins, gives him top-end deal because he thinks he's a top-end player. Then he makes offers to some Raiders. And Andre Sims jumped on it quick. A couple of other guys go out and look, and they're like, man, Raiders were very fair. Now, in one of the cases, I know for a fact, a player was offered more than the Raiders, but it was close, and they don't have to move. And again, that being, we're going to pay you what you're worth. Let's start. I thought the signing of Amir Abdullah, with what he does on special teams, which is phenomenal. Leadership, great guy. He is so good to have around those young running backs. He is, and those young players. He's just a good person, great father. And I know people will say, I don't care about that. Well, then go get your own podcast. I don't care. That's the stuff that they want. And Zeke, because you're in the locker room with me. They want those kind of guys going over to some of these young pups. And they want some of these big dogs coming over. Now, listen, young blood. Stay out of the casino. Relax. Nothing good happens after 11. You need to get your rest. You need to get your sleep. Hey, do you really want to eat 2 pizzas? How about 8 chicken breasts? I mean, they want those dogs helping these guys become, these pups grow up. I love the signing of Amir Abdullah. Is he going to go run for 1,500 yards? No. Is he going to go be an all-pro? No. But he's going to be solid in special teams. He's going to be a great backup at running back. He's going to allow your offense, Luke Getsy, to do some things with him. And he's going to be a presence in that locker. They're trying to have a Amir Abdullah at every position. I love it. Your thoughts on Amir?
Listen, I think I think you look at how early in the whole free agency that he got signed. I think that explains how important he is to the team. But I'll also, to your point, I think one thing that he does on top of leadership, because Amir's been in the league for a minute now, right? Like he's been around the league, and so the fact that he's even still playing
I
at the
covered
running
him in
back.
high school when he was coming into the Big Ten.
Yeah, like it's been like he's been in the league for a minute, right? And you got to think he's been in the league for that long at running back. And what's the shelf life for on average for a running back? What, 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there? He's been in the league over 10, if I'm not mistaken. So that speaks volumes. But I also think with Amir, he's the change of pace guy, right? He's out of the 3 running backs in the backfield, nobody does what he does. And I think that's why it's so important, right? You got Zamir, he's kind of your thumper. You got really 2 thumpers now on your team. Amir's that third down kind of, I don't want to say scat back, if you will, but he's that third down change of pace where he can catch the ball out of the backfield, where Zeus is still working. Zamir's still working on catching the ball out of the backfield. Amir already has that. He has a very unique skill set. In my mind, I look at, and I know we use this word a little bit differently, but he's a specialist in my mind, Abdullah is, because he does so many different things, and he does what he does well, right? He might not do what the next guy does, but he does what he does well. He's so valuable to the team. I was very impressed with that signing. Again, a low-key signing, but huge to the team. Yes, sir.
Zamir Madison is not as good of a runner as Zamir. He's not as good a ball catcher as Zamir. I mean, as Amir. So he's a better runner than Amir, not a better catcher, a better pass receiver than a runner than Zamir. So he's kind of that guy who's, I like him. He's a Swiss Army knife. And, you know, you're in the locker room with me. So we can explain to fans that they don't get to see that the presence of Amir Abdullah and the way that he talks with those young bucks, and you'll see him go over to a young offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, a defensive back. They respect him. He's been around a long time. You can't put a value on that, can you?
Not at all. He's a calming presence. Anytime I was in the locker room, I never really heard or saw Amir really raise his voice too much. But at the same time, his message always got across. Like, you can't fake what he brings to the table. You can't fake being in the league as long as he's been. And I think in the locker room of grown men, of professional football players, they all understand that, right? For anybody to be in this locker room for over X amount of years, or in the NFL locker room for X amount of years, that says volumes, and it speaks for itself. So very calming presence, if you ask me. And again, he does what he does very, very well.
And a great guy. Just a great freaking guy. I love him, man. He's fun to talk to. He's just a good person. I like it because you know how much you and I value fatherhood. And he just loves being a dad. He's just a great guy. All right, let's get on to the next one. This is a guy that the Raiders underjudged the interior offensive line market a little bit. And so Andre James was going to have massive interest. I now know of 8 teams that were going to go after him. And so they made him what they thought was a fair offer. Then when they started to really assess that interior offensive line, they're like, whoa, we got to fix it. They fixed it. He re-signed before they even got to free agency. I know there's a lot of fans that don't like Andre, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. I think he is really good at what he does. He's a very good player, a good guy. I thought the signing of Andre James was a big. Now the left side is just no longer an issue. Just leave it in the middle to the left. Just leave it alone. I love the signing of Andre James.
Yeah, so I would say think about it on a very simplistic level. Where would they be if they didn't re-sign him? Like, think of the massive hole that would be left if there was no Andre James. Now, can he maybe improve in some areas? Yes, but every football player can. But when you think about what he's brought to the table in terms of stability over the last, I believe 5 years in terms of being with the team, lots of stability. And you got to think with Aiden back there, you don't want to now switch out the center, right? Or with maybe Gardner back there, now you're going to switch out the center too. That's one of the most important positions, if not the most important positions on the line. In terms of Andre, very intellectual in terms of leading the offense, in terms of calling the blocks. He does a very good job at that. He's too valuable not to resign. And much like Amir, the fact that he got signed so early speaks to how important it was to make sure that the Raiders kept him, for sure.
I am going to tell you, I am disappointed that he and I are not going to get to tag team tease Jermaine Illuminor this year.
Oh my goodness! Listen, the back and forth between him and Jermaine last year was always entertaining. It's definitely going to miss that for sure.
Jermaine says to me last year, "Okay, are you and Andre going to give me a break or what?" I'm not. Remember the story about the Andre and I had so much fun with Jermaine. That's going to stink. We're going to miss him. All right, now a big signing, physically big, but big also for what this guy brings to the locker room. One of my favorite Raiders. Now, I love the big uglies. You can usually catch me hanging out with the defense and offensive lineman. Is that not true? That's kind of where my
Facts.
space.
Yes.
That's my happy place. Adam Butler. This guy had a great 2023. Solid player, great player. I really like this guy. Adam Butler, break it down.
Yeah, just like again, I keep going back to it because Adam Butler is another example, especially when you put him next to Christian, when you put him next to Coons and Max, some of all the parts, right? And we talked about this earlier in free agency. Earlier we said about another player, we don't really have numbers on him. Go check the numbers on Butler, right? It speaks for itself in terms of the value that he brings to the team. And now basically you got to think about he's going to be one-on-one for the most part against anybody he's going against on the offensive line, which is really going to give him a chance to shine next year. Had a great year this year, great locker room guy. Again, a great signing by the Raiders, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And then we go right down to the next one because, I mean, John Jenkins, great year. He and Adam Butler are the Amir Abdullahs on the defensive line. They're the older guys that just keep everybody in check. And come on, dog, you're trying to become a dog. You're a pup. Let's go. I mean, I'm telling you, I love the Christian Wilkins signing. But if you just sign Christian and don't re-sign these guys, then you're like, you needed these guys. Jenkins was a big hire.
Yeah, so keep Jenkins basically having him on the team, like you said, it adds to the value of Wilkins, right? Because Wilkins, part of the reason he was so successful in Miami is because of who he was playing next to, right? That's the defensive line. That's just how it goes. So to make sure you kept those two quality interior defensive linemen were huge from a veteran standpoint and from, like we said, a physical standpoint on that defensive line. And you got those guys, like you said, Amir Abdullah, and you kind of gave the comparison in between those two. It's the exact same thing, right? You can swap them out, right, and let them do what they do, and they're just as efficient.
Now, they signed Kana Mawaga, the linebacker. And I know a lot of people are like, huh? But this is a young pup that because you and I have been standing next to each other practice sometimes, and we're like, there's a little bit there. There's something to see there. I like this. To me, Zeke, this is a guy that, chances are he phases out because that's the NFL. But there's enough there to say, maybe.
So I think in the game of football, every once in the term is this: coach him up, right? And I think he's one of those guys that you got to coach him up. And if you do, the upside is there. If you don't, like you said, he phases out, but low risk, potentially high reward. And then again, whenever you're going to sign a linebacker, you got to think about who the head coach is, right? If you don't think Antonio Pierce is betting on himself to get the most out of another linebacker, you're fooling yourself. So I think at the linebacker position, and come on, like take a step back. Look at Spillane. He was kind of underrated before he got to the Raiders, right? You look at Diablo, underrated as a linebacker, right? So they have a group of underrated linebackers already. Antonio Pierce is betting on himself to get the most out of all of those linebackers. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is not going to be the last under the radar linebacker signing the Raiders have with AP at the helm. I think you might want to get used to that.
Yeah, but I know you and I sometimes we've sat there, we've watched the linebacker group, and we're like, and sometimes we're like, yeah, I just think Mawaga, he's just got. I'll explain it to you like this: when you go fishing and you're hungry and you're thinking this fish may be big enough to keep, he may beat the legal rules, and you're like, kind of pull on it. He's got a little bit, doesn't he? He got a little bit in him.
Listen, 100%, 100%. That's why That's why they brought him. That's why they brought him in. So he's got potential. That's the word you're looking at.
Now the next guy I like, Isaiah Palomar. I think this safety, I think he's got a real shot. He's working hard. He came in and he was raw. But raw don't mean not good. It just means raw. He's taken coaching. I think this year, this young man's got a chance to make some money now. I like him. Well, your thoughts on
Listen,
IPM?
I completely agree. And this is what I'll say. You said he was raw. I would say with him, it's the intangibles, right? The things that he just has naturally in him that makes him, that gives him so much potential, right? There's things in him that you can't coach. It's just literally in his bloodline. You know what I mean? And this is what I'll say about Isaiah. You know, every time he got a chance last year, especially in the preseason, every time he got a chance to play, he made a play, right? It might have only been one good play, but he shined almost every time he got on the field, but he was raw, right? So he needs more reps. He needs more time on the field. He needs more game experience. And I think he's got a lot of potential to kind of take off, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, he is so football smart. You can't teach football IQ. You either get it or you don't. He's got the physical skills. He just had to be coached up. He just had to be developed.
Yeah. So I agree with you. And he's so naturally talented that, you know, he could get away with doing certain things that might have been outside of technique because he was so talented. But you can only get away with that so much in the NFL. And I think that's what he's kind of had to learn is, hey, stick to the proper way of doing things. And as long as he keeps on doing that and keeps on developing, listen, he can take off.
Now, I have been accused of being too defensive and offensive lineman what John Gruden was with quarterbacks. And I may be a little biased, okay? I don't know if that's true. Do you have an opinion?
Nah.
Liar.
Nah, not at all. No opinion.
They signed Jordan Meredith. Now, I had so many emails. Why? Then you tell people, did you know he played all 17 games last year?
Check the numbers on this guy. Look into him. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yes, go ahead.
Did you look at how he played when he started? Kid is raw. But you look at what guards were getting paid. This is why they had to make an adjustment to Andre. And all of a sudden, hey, here's a homegrown talent. He's tough. Not homegrown, but I mean, he's there. He's tough. They like him. And he comes at a price tag that allows his team to be frugal, think long term. I like the signing of Jordan Meredith. I just like his hands, the way he works his hand. I mean, he's got meat hooks, man. Well, listen, if you've ever been in a butcher shop, what?
Listen, I have never in my life heard anybody break down offensive linemen's hands the way you listen. You listen. You love you some old linemen. You love the big uglies, man. You love the big uglies.
Well, what I like is if you ever been in a butcher shop or ever shot a deer and taken it to the processor, they take these big hooks and they hook the animal up on it, okay? He's got meat hooks. And when Jordan Meredith, when he gets that, he gonna move to now. Now, I'm not saying he's all pro. I'm not saying there isn't growth. Coach Greg's gonna have a fun time with him. But I like Meredith, and I call him the meat hook. I like the meat hook.
Listen, depth and versatility are the things that come to mind when I think about, and then again, value, like you said, right? Those three things, that makes him so invaluable. And you think about, okay, what happens if / when one of the old linemen goes down? It's a long season. Somebody's going to get nicked up. It's inevitable. You have a dependable option to throw in there. And guess what? You have him at a great rate. Again, another very, very under the radar signing that most people aren't going to understand. But the coaches and those that know, they know. Very, very quality signing for the Raiders.
Meat Hook Meredith. Is that not one of the best modern day Raider nicknames? Jordan Meat Hook Meredith.
Listen, you got to trademark that one.
All right. Now, I got a couple things I want to talk to you about. Then we're going to get to quarterbacks and the draft. I would like to see them get rid of the practice squad. I know why they have it. It's because you pay those people cheaper money because you develop them. But I just think you expand the roster to 60 players, 62 maybe, get rid of the practice squad, maybe up to 65, and then go to 18 games and only have 2 preseason. Make it 62 to 65 roster. and go 18 games, 2 preseason? Like or dislike?
I like it. It's in terms of the fact that it covers really all your bases, right? You get an added games, and obviously the players are going to kind of give you some pushback on that. But again, shorter preseason, so the added game is not that big of a deal, and you got more players to deal with the longer season. So the idea of adding games and taking away the practice squad, it makes a lot of sense on a lot of different levels because, like AP kind of alluded to last year, those guys are on the team, right? They're still there, so you might as well just go ahead and bring them on up and expand the roster.
Okay. I was talking to a very famous Hall of Famer this week, and we were talking about stats, and he made a really good point that if back in the day they played 14 games or 12 games, and now you're playing 17, when somebody breaks somebody's record like for in a year, it's not a legitimate record, is it?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that it's not legitimate, but you definitely have to put an asterisk next to it for sure, because it's not the same, right? If you had an extra game, I mean, it's just like, yeah, you should have higher stats. You have an extra time, an extra chance of playing. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's you got to put an asterisk next to it at the very least.
I just want to give him a quick shout out because he did not think that I would use that on the air. There you go, brother. Now, let's go to quarterback, okay? As you know, I was in Orlando for the owners' meetings. This is what Antonio Pierce said about Anthony Brown. I asked him about Anthony Brown, who's on the roster, and he's not getting a lot of talk, who, has started some games in the NFL. He's had a little bit of success. He says, quote, extremely athletic, offers a dynamic, very mobile, very athletic, gets off out of the pocket, good poise about him. Okay, he's talking about Anthony Brown. Here's what he says about Gardner Minshew. He's been through adversity. We want that experience as well in here. So to me, it was a good fit, cultural fit, and he beat us. Okay? Now, listen to what he says when he's talking about AO4. Quote, I mean, do you want to throw him to the, this is what he talked about with a rookie, I mean, do you want to throw him to the fire? No, I don't think that's been the best way. I played with a guy like Eli Manning, first pick overall. Didn't play until week 8 or 9 of his rookie year. Didn't become a starter till year 2. So, 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Well, we'll do what's best for the player and ourselves going forward. This is what he's talking about with a rookie. Now listen to what he says about about AO4. Quote, would love to see him become more vocal. Is he ever going to become a runner? No, not going to happen. That's okay. But there's other ways that you can do that and move around in the pocket. I think he's done a great job this offseason, being in the building, staying in Las Vegas, and really working on that. So, one thing I'd love to see him do is be more vocal. You don't want a quarterback being a church mouse. I don't need him being rah-rah either. But when things are wrong, I need him to fix it and be vocal about it. A lot to discuss right there. Go ahead.
So I think for Aiden, in terms of if you're looking into that quote, I think it's like when the teacher gives you the answers to the test and all you got to do is put the right answer down. You don't have to try to figure it out. You don't have to think. Just do what the teacher told you to do and you'll be fine. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's one of those things of Gardner was brought in to push him, right, to bring a veteran leadership. But I've said it the whole offseason. I think AP wants Aiden. I think AP is a loyal guy. And I think when AP and Aiden got thrown into that situation last year, neither of them picked each other. Okay, neither one of them signed up to be with each other in that situation, and they made it through. So I think AP is loyal to Aiden to a certain degree, but he needs more out of him. And like you said, you got to be a vocal quarterback, right? You got to be able to depend on the quarterback to call the shots when things are not right. If he doesn't do it, who's going to do it, right? And honestly, if Aiden doesn't do it, the person that's probably going to do it is going to be Gardner Minshew, right? So I think AP is saying, hey, take it, young man, and run with it. I think he has the utmost confidence in Aiden, and he just wants to see him, talk a little bit more. So Aiden has a huge opportunity in front of him. I think everybody's pushing for Aiden. I think he has the potential to be great. He just has to go. He has to go take the reins. Is basically what's going on.
All right, now I want to go to the quarterback because Cleveland's not trading. We've been reporting since the season. Soon as it ended, I was telling people literally the next day, I'm hearing Washington's not moving. I was told by someone in Washington who I've known a long time, we're not trading. Okay. I think there is one trade the Patriots would make. One. But it would be for a quarterback. So I don't think they're trading. So, however you look at the top three, I think Hondo's opinion, it's going to be Caleb, Jaden, JJ. Gone. I know Minnesota wants Drake May, so I think they're going to do their best to move to 4 or 5 and get Drake May. Okay? Now, I love Michael Penix. I've said this so many times. Great kid, great player. There is nothing about Michael Penix to not like, except 4 season-ending injuries, 2 knees, 2 shoulders. And orthopedic surgeons will tell you drafting a quarterback in the first round who's had any of those is a risk. All 4. I was talking to a executive who I trust, who is considered one of the best quarterback drafters of all time, who said, I love Penix. Would not touch him before the 3rd round. You cannot risk first-round picks. They've got to hit. You can't hope they hit. They've got to hit if you're going to be a good franchise, which I thought was pretty phenomenal. My question to you, Zeke, if the Raiders go pick a Penix or a Nix and he pans out, great, but is it worth the risk?
If he pans out great, listen, it's worth the risk. I think, like you said, it's the fact that he had those specific injuries in terms of Penix. Knees, whenever you're talking about a receiver, a running back, a quarterback with knee issues, it's always going to be scary no matter what. Whenever they have a history that, it's always going to scare you. But do I think it's worth the risk for Penix? Yes, sir, I do. In terms of Knicks, based on everything we've heard and seen this offseason, I'm not quite sure. But I do think that it's worth the risk potentially at 13. If they were to trade back, it's definitely worth the risk. But it all depends on how they value Penix and how they value their quarterback room, in my opinion.
So I'm going to ask this question a different way. Would you pull the trigger on Penix or Nix? Because is the risk worth it? If you're the Raiders, so I'm grabbing my phone here. This is a text I got from an NFL executive.
I was about to say, Hondo got a text. I want to know what the text says.
Well, no, I didn't just get the text now. I got it last night, but I want to read it to you. Hondo, this is because I was talking to them about the question we're discussing right now. Hondo, here's the problem I have with Nix or Penix or anyone else. The Raiders have a ton of talent. Devontae Adams is not on the downward cycle yet, but he is clearly in his prime. And if you're rebuilding, you trade him. If you go pick a rookie quarterback in the first round, that's fine. But if you miss, you've thrown away a first-round draft pick in the year. I think they saw enough with Aiden, brought Gardner in for the clear backup. You ride this draft out. If you get a development guy later, fine. But you ride this out. Find out what you have with Aiden. And then next year, if Aiden wasn't the guy, you're solid at every position. You got some guys to resign. You can trade a bunch of draft picks to go get somebody's number 1 and go get you a quarterback. There's going to be a few of them next year. To me, this is less risk, and that's where championships are won.
Yeah, so
I'm not advocating it. I'm just telling you what I'm told.
So when you asked the question earlier in terms of was it worth the risk, that's kind of what I was thinking. Was it worth the risk? I'm not quite sure that it's worth the risk. More so because of who they already have in terms of the quarterback in the quarterback rooms. Considering what they already have, it might not be as worth the risk as if they didn't have those quarterbacks back there. So yeah, I definitely see both sides to it.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
100%.
I mean, when you start looking at this stuff and you start dissecting this stuff, I've got a podcast coming on where teams have drafted over the last 20 years and over the last 10. And it's clear which teams are good, which teams aren't. And the teams that are traditionally pick high are traditionally bad.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
No, I'm sorry to have cut you off, but I was going to say, the teams that are picking high are usually, they're picking high and missing on those draft picks, for the most part, and having to find themselves still picking high year after year after year because they're still a bad team after missing on so many draft picks. So yeah, I definitely, it makes sense on a lot of levels.
You're grabbing something here. I want to read you. This blew my mind. This will blow your brain. Oh, I just lost it. I'll get it back and I'll have it the next time you're on the podcast. You and I are going to do that the next time you're on the podcast. We're going to look at who traditionally has been drafting high in the draft.
And it's probably the same handful of, 5 to 10 teams probably.
And you're going to see why are they bad? It's because they take risks, not necessary. Listen, I love Penix. I love Nix. Both great young men. Both have a lot of talent. If the Raiders pick them in the first round, I'm going to be great. Good for them because they're good guys. They're not bad guys. They're not guys you don't want to, you want to root against. I root for good people. It's just risky. And I think if you're going to be good, you eliminate risk, correct?
Agree. That's business 101, right? Limit your risk. So yes, sir. I agree with you.
All right. Tell everybody, where do they find you on X?
On X, yes, EZ Trezevan. Just it's my first two letters of my first name and my full last name. So E, Z as in zebra, T as in Tom, R-E, Z as in zebra, and then it should pop up from there.
Awesome. And of course, you can find me on IG when you go to Hondo SR. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to @Hondo Carpenter and you can read everything Zeke and I write when you go to si.com/NFL/Raiders.